Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, living beneficiaries, to the show for living beneficiaries, the House of Hidalgo show on the Estate Radio Network. Prepare for the most educational 60 minutes on all of radio with your host, Rick Hidalgo. The House of Hidalgo show can be followed on Twitter or Facebook by searching House of Hidalgo. Find the show on the web at www.therockofsalem.org. Sign up for the newsletter, and while you're there, take the 5-question survey to let us know what you think. The Estate Radio Network is part of the Blog Talk Radio family of networks and can be found at www.blogtalkradio.com/South Dakota DP. Join the show now by chat or call 619-639-4605. Don't forget to dial 1 to get in the queue. Here's your host, Rick Hidalgo! Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rick Hidalgo. I am your host. This is, of course, the House of Hidalgo show on Blog Talk Radio. I want to make a quick reminder to all you listeners. There is a chat going on down at the bottom of the screen at the blogtalkradio.com/South Dakota DP. There's a chat going on the bottom there. If you have a question, please put your question in the chat. Otherwise, you can call our number, that is 619-639-4605, and ask your question live on the air. So just a little recap here. Tonight we have our good friend Dr. Paul Klebs with us. He is a third-generation naturopathic doctor. When I say third generation, there's been natural means of healing going on in his family for 3 generations. And he is joining us again today to continue the series that we started, the number one reason for dis-ease. Of course, by now we're down around the 5-6 reason level. But without any further ado, I'm going to bring him on. Dr. Klebs, are you with us?
Yes, thank you.
I'm really glad that you came back on our show tonight. I apologize for last week. That was really crazy. My power just, boom, went out right at the 4 minutes before the show was to conclude. But you were just getting rolling, and you were talking about a little bit of spiritual slash psychological stuff, and I'm just going to give you the floor.
Thank you. Yes, we were finishing up talking about the emotions, how they control the person's health. And sometimes when we're looking for a supplement or looking for a solution, a treatment, a therapy, we seem to forget the basis is if there's a dis-ease, there's an emotional counterpart that's playing into that, causing people to have frustration. And oftentimes we'll hear them say, I've tried everything, and of course that's impossible because, first off, no one knows everything. We've been 3 generations in our family focusing, and we still don't have all the answers. But I have been able to put together some of the concepts so that you can revisit in case you are struggling with your health. I say it this way. You're a spirit being in a trace mineral body, electrically stimulated, emotionally controlled. The first evening we visited was about the number one cause for disease, which was dehydration, which for the most part is very inexpensive to get your health back on track, but you need to understand that the water you drink should be part of the picture. The healthier, the better. The second was, to recap, was if you don't have enough water, you're going to have poor digestion. And most Americans have poor digestion, and there's other reasons, including the fact that convenience is in charge in our country. We used to have pickled juice and pickled watermelon and pickled this, pickled that, so we had the building blocks of vinegar to help us build our digestion. And now, with convenience, oftentimes when I ask a group how many had something with vinegar in it today, and there'll only be two hands in the whole seminar. So it's no wonder we have poor digestion. Poor digestion makes it so the brain doesn't work, so that we have things like anxiety and anxiousness and anger and depression. Our screensaver on our computer says, "Worry steals your joy," and as a total, you spend worry steals your joy, and you get busy about doing nothing. I say worry is changing diapers on a baby not yet born. But a lot of that has to do with poor digestion. So if we look at that portion, but leading into poor digestion, we look at the emotional part also. And that's what we covered last time. I feel that there's many more pieces, many more segments to help assist the body, but that would be like the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
What I wanted to cover a little bit tonight would be the immune system, because we have a lot of confusion. Again, for convenience, if a baby gets the sniffles, well, of course it's treated like it's an antibiotic deficiency, when really it probably doesn't need anything but some colostrum, or you needed to have mother's milk, or goat's milk if you can find it raw, would be best. But goats have one stomach, and babies have one stomach, and cows have four stomachs. So giving cow's milk to a baby is pretty treacherous. My one son, my oldest son, was diagnosed with allergic to milk at a young age. He had warts all over his body, and we didn't know at that time that cow's milk was. I didn't understand how come that would damage him, because on the farm we had cow's milk in the bottle, but it wasn't pasteurized, so the body could break down the enzymes, and it had enough bacteria to keep it going. So studying the immune system, we want to look at what we lost, because we used to have ways to get well without upsetting the whole structure. Once you take antibiotics, and I discussed this before, but take the word apart and you see that it's against life. Well, it's against unfriendly bacteria, but it also takes out most of the friendly bacteria, leaving problems for stool issues. And with babies especially, it's real critical that you keep their bowels working so they don't get constipated, because a baby that loses its friendly bacteria can't digest its food and is apt to get very constipated and can get very ill. And so then the immune system gets compromised, and so they end up with snotty nose or cold or fever or whatever, which usually most caring parents will trot them right down to get looked at by a medical doctor, and antibiotics would be obviously the convenient form to just stop the challenge. And there is a place for antibiotics if there's nothing else available. But let's go back in history. Grandpa used to have on his mantle a pipe, not because he was a smoker necessarily, but if a grandchild or a child was to get ear infection, all it would take is a couple puffs of pipe tobacco in a pipe and blow that in the ear. And I didn't just learn that to reproduce it verbally. We've seen it work many times. When one of our sons had a ear infection, we were driving back from Grand Canyon, and it was almost midnight, and we found a drugstore open, and I spent $1 and some cents on a cigar and lit it up, blew the smoke in his ear about 3 times, and it completely got rid of a nasty earache. Now, there may be times when that doesn't work, but I've seldom seen it. There's also ear candles, and you can use pipe smoke, but some people even use cigarette smoke, but I would recommend the cigar, and then just leave it till next time when when someone has an ear infection because it's only like $1, maybe $2 now with inflation. So that's what was in the history. Now that's still a Band-Aid. That's not actually fixing it. It just makes it so you don't have to run and get antibiotics.
And Dr. Klebs, are you saying that the nicotine or what?
No, it's just a smoke. You can take a hollow ear candle, and the smoke will do the same thing. But here's the challenge: the reason the grandpas had it on the mantle. If you put an ear candle on a baby's ear, you have to hold their head down, and you traumatize the child because they hear the crackling of the ear candle, which is just a hollow beeswax candle, and that pushes smoke down the center of the ear candle, and it works beautiful. So it's just the smoke that seems to go after the fungus and the bacteria for some reason.
Huh.
I've had it work so many times I can't offhand even think of a single time it failed, but usually we instruct the parents over the phone, and if they got a smoker in the house, or hopefully they don't, but if they can find someone who's willing to light up a cigar or a pipe, boy, it sure beats a trip to the hospital or the clinic.
Yeah.
And it never has a harmful side effect, whereas the ear candle could traumatize. That would be a harmful side effect in my book. Now,
right.
If you go back to when Grandpa did the pipe, there was something else that was very much a part of the household. I'll back up, clear up to the old country. The deepest study I could find on understanding silver or colloidal silver or the frequency of silver, the people who do the research have never found a single pathogen yet that can survive in the frequency of the presence of silver. So let me just do a little common sense storytelling here so we can understand our history, because we've lost our heritage. I was born into a time when antibiotics were becoming king, and now there's getting to be some things that the antibiotics won't knock out. So we need to maybe go back and revisit our heritage. In the old country, they did not have water purification systems. They had food that was questionable. They did not have refrigerators yet. They did not have any type of way to preserve their food. You just pick it and eat it, and if it sat around very long, you could get very sick. If you were royalty, all of your food would be not only preserved in silver, but it would be served to you in silver. And that were some of the phrases like served on a silver platter, or born with a silver spoon in his mouth, or that type of thing. It's talking about the royalty, because if you were to dip into, say, questionable, unfriendly bacteria running rampant in some food that's been setting out, and you put it on a shovel, some people call it silverware.
Yes.
And that food, just setting in the presence of that silver, would be neutralized so that it would no longer harm the person eating it. They had silver goblets. Now, if they weren't quite as wealthy, they'd have a goblet with a silver ring around the top, and sometimes you'll still find those in an antique store that somebody brought to this country. Today we have stainless. You know, why would they call it stainless? It wasn't popular to serve company on silver that had tarnished. Not that it made any difference in its effectiveness, but it looked dirty. So they used chemicals, harsh chemicals, and they'd have to scrub before the company came over. And sure enough, everybody's impressed. But somebody, when they invented a way to do a stainless fork, knife, spoon, of course, again, we jumped at convenience, and we lost that potential to heal the food of unfriendly bacteria before it got to our mouth. Now, if we back up, I used to read a lot of Westerns because I always felt like being a pioneer would have been a good time to be alive. And I remember reading about when they finished the canteen of water, they'd shake it, and there was a coin in there. Now, why was that coin in there? That's not a very smart place to hide your money, because it's hard to get that money out when you want to spend it, and you sure hate to dump out precious water just to get to your silver dollar, silver quarter, whatever it was that you had in the canteen. So we know that by just logic, that wasn't where a thief, I mean, you hide your money so a thief wouldn't steal it, because if he had any concept, he'd know there's at least a silver dollar if he wants to rob a wagon train. Now, when the wagon trains were going across the country, the route was not because of get to go by the Grand Canyon or get to go by some scenic site or some scenic route. Their mind was bent on getting to their destination as fast as they could, and they went to the straightest distance between what 2 points? It was from water hole to water hole, not from state to state or state to north or south part of a state. It was from water to water to water, because water was the commodity that determined if you lived or died on that trip. I'm a farm boy, and I've often wondered how come when you put a cow in a drinking water, oxen, not horses, but cows and oxen, they have not read that sign that says, posted by the Pollution Control Agency, that you must be 500 yards from the water hole before you take a number 2 dump if you're a cow. In fact, the cow will go right out into water, drink it, up comes the tail, and out comes a tremendous amount of guacamole. Now that guacamole is so full of harmful bacteria, everything you can imagine from the gut of that animal is now placed in the water that's going to make you get dysentery or very, very ill if you dip your canteen into that water. Now, people can argue about the value of silver being foolishness, and they say, and the only way they've got to deter people from common sense on this one is say, well, aren't you afraid if you do too much silver, you're going to get I've heard you're going to get blue.
Oh,
Your skin's going to turn blue. And I thought, compared to casket color or compared to somebody having dysentery, I think blue would be quite an improvement. The truth of it is, you'll go your whole lifetime in this country, and you might actually run into 1 or 2 people that heard or knew a person who had a bluish hue that was drinking it every day. Heaven forbid, they're healthy, but they have blue skin. So when you go back to history, where that rumor is coming from is what was called the royalties, also known as blue bloods, because they had a bluish hue because everything they ate from, like I started the discussion about, was from silver. So they did get enough silver, I believe, to get the bluish hue. I would rather take my chances. I need to tell you about, it doesn't take a lot to do what the body needs. I was in Southern California at a health conference, and a lady that I knew there came up to me and she said, do you know where there's an emergency room here in Southern California? And she was from Minnesota. I said, I don't know. She said, well, do you have anything that could help me? I've got pneumonia. And you could hear her chest rattling. And I said, well, I just bought an ounce of colloidal silver from a health food store to bring on this trip. And I haven't opened it, but that's all I've got, so be very careful. I'll let you use some. And so she used a few drops. And that was $20 an ounce back then for an ounce of colloidal silver.
Right.
That was on a Friday night. Saturday, here she is walking through the lobby with her mother, arm in arm, all happy. And I said, how's the pneumonia? She said, oh, yeah. No, Mom and I are going off to Knott's Berry Farm. Totally forgot that she had pneumonia the night before. And so just a little smidgen, a few drops of colloidal silver turned that around. Now, some people say, well, how much and how many parts per million? I don't get into any kind of argument. If you want to make it so, 10 parts per million, 100 parts per million, so it tastes funny, go right ahead. But 5 parts per million seems to be all that it takes. If you think that food only has to be in the presence of the frequency of the silver on your spoon before you eat it. So it doesn't take much silver to make a difference. Now, why don't we know about it? Because it's so cheap to make. I knew of a doctor in Canada that kept track, and she had over $4,000 she could have sold sold it for. She sold it for $15 for a pint. And the first set of silver rods that she used made over $4,000 worth of colloidal silver. Now, she had to change out the 9-volt batteries, but that's simple. There's only 3 9-volt batteries, 27 volts, and some jeweler's silver. It's so inexpensive to make and use. It's no wonder we're not allowed to have it, because they would like to figure out how to do a campaign against it, because when antibiotics are failing, it hurts nothing to add in the colloidal silver.
Yeah. And I tell you, they are campaigning against it. Just go to Google.com and type in colloidal silver, and you'll 9 out of 10 times you'll get a picture of this guy who's got silver skin, and they'll market the fact that he overdosed on colloidal silver. So they've found ways of pushing against the goads there.
Well, they'd have to argue that the era of stainless is probably better too, and actually stainless doesn't have any way to reverse the pathogens that are sitting in a stainless shovel. So I call it a shovel because it seems like we shovel our food in. But
yeah.
That's 2 things to help your immune system without having to pay for somebody's Lexus payment or a new asphalt driveway. The next one I'm going to share with you is really quite funny.
Hey, and before you go there, Dr. Klebs, maybe we should advise people or warn people, don't throw a coin in the bottom of your glass of water, because none of our coins these days have silver in them.
No, they're fake.
It'd actually be toxic to throw a nickel in there.
Yeah, and it wouldn't benefit you, and it could harm you. That's good that you brought that up. Thanks.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. If you go back to the same time as people using silver, they had another part of their history that was lost for most of my lifetime. What I understand from my grandparents and then my parents, it was still used then. If a baby got sick, they would try to find either another mom that's nursing to get other different friendly bacteria, or to get what they call a wet nurse, or they try to find colostrum, or they try to find goat's milk. But what they're looking for was different forms of friendly bacteria. Now, if you're having a baby with the runs or a calf with scours, I'll guarantee you the balance of unfriendly bacteria versus friendly bacteria in the gut is the unfriendlies are in charge. The way that some people will reverse that would be with an enema, just to wash it all out and then maybe implant or make sure that they take a probiotic, pro-life, pro-bio, bio standing for life, probiotic. That would start with acidophilus, bifidophilus, clausodophilus, L. salivarius, L. sporongenes, a bunch of words you can't pronounce. But here's the thing of it. If you take an anti-against-life biotic, you run the risk of killing off hundreds, if not, some people say thousands, but I'm going to be conservative, hundreds of friendly bacteria, as well as saving the person's life. Now, there is a place for antibiotics, and there's times when times are tough, and we don't have time to turn something around because somebody's really desperately ill. You can build back some of the friendly bacteria, so that's what I'm going to talk about. If you've had any antibiotics, you need to be hunting friendly bacteria. And my favorite for baby is goat's milk, and goat's colostrum is even better. Because you can usually get enough to make a difference. But the key word here is colostrum. And colostrum used to be a no-no. In other words, you weren't supposed to have it except for animals. And of course, like I said before, there's no life insurance on animals, so they're more desperate to make sure that you save an animal than a human.
Right.
Because quite often the never event, new word that I just learned this week. A never event happens, and it has to be kind of hidden, and people end up suffering. The word inside of, according to this article, the word inside of the Western program is, and this is never supposed to happen. So when it does happen, an oops by another word is iatrogenic. When the oops happens, they call it a never event. And so we pretty much most of us have seen situations where the animal gets first attention, and the baby or the adult, sometimes there's a lot of confusion. Not that someone's trying to do it on purpose, but that's all they know. So that's why we do a talk show or where we read books or try to study some of this. I must tell you, years ago, they knew about colostrum, and people that were trying to teach on it were treated as criminals. And I know personally the person who brought colostrum to the market so that not just the animals could have it, but the humans could also heal with it. And he's a precious, precious medical doctor out of Texas that brought out that product in another taboo at the same time. And there's reasons why he could do that, because he had built the benchmark of laboratories of anybody's research that you can imagine. And so there's nobody was going to challenge him when he put those on the market. I want to tell you about a relative, because sometimes, Wayne Dyer says God gives you friends to apologize for your relatives. and sometimes when you try to give the good news that can help somebody save their life or enhance their life, and it's a relative, well, they knew you when you were a little kid. Like I say, I was a good kid on the farm. I never once pulled the cat's tail, but I did hold the cat's tail and let the cat do all the pulling.
Yeah.
And they knew me back then. So my brother and his wife were a little bit, they put up with me, but they're polite. And so one time I came back about a 6-hour drive, and I saw my sister-in-law, and I said, how you doing? And she said, oh, I've got pneumonia. I said, I've got something that might help. I can't afford it. And I said, well, it's $25. So I left her be. About 3 weeks later, I come back again on another trip. How you doing, Donna? And she says, I'm terrible. I missed 2 weeks of work. They've tried every antibiotic and nothing's helping. I've got walking pneumonia. I don't know what to do. I said, I got something for you. I can't afford it. I said, yeah, you missed 2 weeks of work. I can understand. So I'll trade. I'll trade something with, because I've learned a long time ago, if I just give it to them, it's not that I'm not self-centered, that I couldn't give up $25. It's that if you give it to them that has no value, and it's going to sit in the cupboard, and they'll say it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I traded for a whiteboard, which I've never used. In fact, I just ran across that thing the other day. It's all deteriorated and warped. And I traded for a bottle, and before I left to see her that night, she's definitely got pneumonia. She's running fever. She's rattles. Across the kitchen I could hear her, bubble rattle in her lungs. I made her take 2 capsules of colostrum. I opened the bottle, pulled out the cotton, gave it to her, and made her get water. I said, now in 2 hours you could, about lunchtime, you might take a couple more, and then take a couple more before bed. 6 capsules. Well, next morning, I come back, and it was Saturday morning. I said, well, how you doing? She said, oh, I'm going to a craft show. Totally forgot that she had missed 2 weeks of work, no rattling pneumonia. So it isn't like out here in the natural world we're stuck with no hope if we don't have access to some medical policy or somebody's latest experimental new antibiotic or whatever. the natural path has natural solutions. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody's going to work. It's not going to work on everybody and as well as what I just told you. But some of that will have to do with the mindset, the emotional part. Some of it will have to do with what other toxic load are they putting into their system on a daily basis. And if I can go further on the immune system, I'm going to probably bust a few myths here in the next few minutes.
I'll tell you what, hold on to that for just a minute. We're going to take a quick little 2-minute break where I can pay the bills here, and we'll come right back. Do you have hopes, dreams, and goals, but don't know how to reach them? Do you wonder how you could do differently to achieve greater success at home or at work? Do you feel like something is holding you back from enjoying your life to the fullest? Are you fed up with status quo and ready for real and lasting life change? Are you wanting to start a business or expand an existing one? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then you are ready for life coaching with Mr. Attitude. Mr. Attitude will stretch and grow you and take your life to a whole new level of success by equipping you with the tools to help you to accomplish more in less time, get and keep your priorities in line, gain greater happiness and joy, face your fears, plan for success, be more assertive and confident, overcome negative stress, deal with negative thinking, set goals you will achieve, and more. Mr. Attitude specializes in results producing. Life strategy coaching for the personal side of your life, small business coaching for those who want to start a small business or build a stronger small business, train the trainer coaching for those who aspire to become a motivational professional speaker. Call today and reserve your appointment with greater success. 605-450-1955. That's 605-450-1955. Or email Bob at MrAttitudespeaks.com. That's MrAttitudespeaks.com. Mr. Attitude is committed to your success. Do you remember the series of the 70s and 80s? You know, the Dukes of Hazzard, I Dream of Jeannie, Mork and Mindy, Hogan's Heroes, the list goes on and on and on. Of course you do. Why? Because they were family-friendly shows. What's the one place you can go on the internet to find them? www.retroshowsarbetter.com. Go by my Ace store and get yourself some popcorn and a movie and meet me there. All right, this is your host, Rick Hidalgo. This is, of course, the House of Hidalgo show. This is another Friday evening with Dr. Klebs. He has joined us by telephone. In the first half, we spoke a lot about colloidal silver and some mentions about colostrum and some testimonies concerning those things. And hopefully while we were away at break, none of you went and took a glass of water and threw a nickel in it, because we warned you not to do that. It would create some toxins in your water. So with all that aside, we have Dr. Klebs back for the second half of our program, and he promised us just before the break he was going to take us to a new place. So, Dr. Klebs, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, observation over the years and help from others and my grandpa and my dad, we never were in fear of a fever, a cold, or the flu. And it seems like because of our convenience and our duct tape mentality and the covering up for lack of knowledge, the Bible says for lack of knowledge we perish, we've gone for the quick fix with harmful side effects in many cases. If a person is healthy enough to have a cold, I've had a number of people over the years, and they say, I'm so healthy I never get a cold. And I quiz them a little bit about their lifestyle, and some of them are definitely have figured out how to keep the immune system in check. But I say, you need to be checked, make sure that you don't have cancer, because The body cannot divide its energy between cancer and having a cleansing action called a cold. It'll save and reserve its energy to fight the fungus, which is known as cancer, and not allow energy to be wasted on a cold. Oftentimes when someone has been diagnosed with cancer and they educate themselves to where they get themselves back to healing, and they have a cold and they panic because, any symptom if you had cancer on your chart is obviously the cancer is back. And they call up to find out, what do I do for a cold? And I said, celebrate. And they look at you, they talk like you're nuts. And I thought, well, be thankful your body has enough energy to now have a cleansing action. So embrace the cold. Let's understand what the body needs to do to heal faster. And we give them information about a colon cleanse. Now, a fever, most of the time, is the body's attempt to raise the temperature to kill the pathogens in your bloodstream. And I suggest that some of the fevers that people have already gotten, and say some drugs to throw a diversion program so the body no longer carries on with the cleansing action called a fever. Even at, I've seen where they've actually done it at 99 or 100 degrees, and that's not enough temperature to knock out a pathogen. Most people that do healing therapies will either set in a spa or have they try to raise the body temperature to about 104 degrees in the spa so that it kills the pathogens. And I've seen some tremendous results from a guy in Southern California that was doing that with a lot of people, and I was very impressed enough to where I would like to build a temperature control thing like he had. But a fever is a great part of the body's healing mechanism. A story of my own family. My daughter was 16 years old, and she didn't know. I said, do you want to go mom's way or dad's way? And mom's way would have been some pills from the pharmacy. Dad's way would have been, well, I had just let her decide for herself. She said, what are you going to do, Dad? And I said, well, I'm going to watch you, and we're going to have you miss school today because you need to run this fever up. Oh, I hate missing school. Well, you got a fever, and let's get it over with so you don't get something worse. So I'd check her temperature about every 2 hours. And finally, it'd run all day, and nighttime the fever usually gets higher. But it had dipped a little bit from the previous temperature taking, and I said, Faith, I'm going to leave something here by the bedside. You taste it, and if it tastes good, you go ahead and take it. And I left the room. Now, what I put beside her bed was 2 ounces of dill pickle juice. And when she took it, that fever, and I came with a thermometer just shortly after she took it. I said, how was that? She said, that tasted good, Dad. And I took her temperature. It was like 99, and took just a little bit the rest of the evening to clean up the fever. It made an effect on her at 16. She's today a doctor herself. But I've also used it, and this one just amazes me. I don't remember who told me. It drives me crazy to think that I can't remember who the source of this. On babies that you can't, the infants and stuff, they're too young to get them to drink dill pickle juice, and you just rub it, the raw pickle juice, right on the bottom of the right foot. It has something to do with correcting polarity, which is something I probably should cover at another time, because I don't know of anybody else out there teaching it, and I am a recipient of having most of my life till middle adulthood with reverse polarity, and now we know how to correct it. But on the babies, it seems to help, and sometimes it'll bring a fever down just within minutes. I had a very elderly man call me from a state away, and his wife called and wanted to do about his high fever, and it was high enough to do some good. It was like 103, and I asked how long he'd been running it, and it was like a day already. And I asked some other questions, and I said, well, if he feels like he wants to let the fever be finished, if he's done, give him some dill pickle juice. And it just brought him around also within just a few minutes. Now, if you get it too prematurely, it won't affect, and it'll probably slow down the value of having a fever run for a while.
Wow. Now, Dr. Klebs, is that rubbing the pickle juice, the raw pickle juice on the right foot of an infant? Is that related to reflexology?
Well, no, I think reflexology is where you actually, boy, that's premature. It very well could be, because all of the points on the bottom of the feet just got fed and nutritional balance of what the body's needing. It could be reflexology. Boy, now you got me thinking. Normally I would say no, because that's pressure points breaking up crystals that are over the matching meridians of the organs. But maybe just a quick dose of the vinegar and all the salt and all that's mixed with the dill pickle juice. And people say, well, why don't you use apple cider vinegar? And I say, well, that's okay if you're a hardened, seasoned person doing nutrition. You'll put up with a bite in the taste, or you'll mix it with water. But the dill pickle juice is one of my favorite things on planet Earth, because the salt is in there, so you have sodium chloride, NaCl. You have a tincture of garlic, tincture of dill, hopefully really has dill. And by the way, next time someone's a little anxious or anxiety, try chewing dill pickle seeds. There's something in the dill pickle seeds that seem to help them over the hump. But in dill pickle juice, you've also got sometimes other seasonings, and you've got the tincture of the pickle itself, which actually has some nutritional value if it's raised properly. So I always do the dill pickle juice, and they say, well, what about where do I get it? And I say, well, if you don't have something that you got from some neighbor that knows how to make it, get the stuff from the store. And they say, from the store, it's got dye number 5 and dye number, I think it's got blue and yellow dye, which who knows why they started doing that. But even that works in a pinch better than taking some kind of side effect causing drug, is my recommendation. For those people that are just learning, I know that you're going to have to do some adjusting to what I'm speaking, but I'm from the other side. We were raised without drugs in the house, and so for me it's a real stretch to go into drugs thinking I'm going to benefit without harmful side effects, when I have what you're already looking for in the natural world, sometimes 6 different ways to go at the same problem. It's real tough for me to get excited about telling you to go take something that's going to damage the liver or the kidneys. Now, the next mythbuster, and I call it the myth 3 of deception. The flu is a cleansing action. It's not something to be feared. It's something to pay attention to. In fact, you get the flu, you have no option but to pay attention. But let's read the body. Let's listen to the messenger instead of trying to kill a messenger before it ever gets a chance to talk to you. Some people can go their whole life and never get the flu. Some people have the flu every couple of years. I remember as a child having the flu, and my dad didn't understand what caused it. He just thought it was just one of those things that comes and goes to the house. The flu is when you have an involuntary cleanse because you're not intelligent, intelligent or educated enough to know that there's a method to cleanse the body so you never have to have the flu. Now, the flu, you quit eating, you start having the diarrhea, the body goes into nasty, almost like convulsive type reactions to get the poison out. It is not a deficiency of thimerosal or deficiency of vaccination. In fact, we live in a community where a lot of older population, and it's so sad to see that they were healthy their whole life, even up to 90-some years, and we have a couple of cases where they made it into the hundreds. But after a few years of getting the flu shot, all of a sudden they'll get one more flu shot, and it tips them over the edge, and oops, you have a funeral, usually about January or February. I've often said that if I was going to purchase a mortuary and I wanted to recover most of my money in a short time, I'd make sure I had the closing before January. And I can give you some of my opinion. Of course, everybody has opinions, but one of the best, that'd be sarcastic, one of the most certain ways to end up with a need for cleansing actions, everything from a cold to a fever to a flu, is to have a sugar diet. Processed sugar is not it's acid. It's not healthy for the human. In fact, if you want to go back, the book is now being reprinted called Sugar Blues by Patrick Duffy. It's a 1974 book. You read that, and you will never have to question again who done it and why they did it and why it's such a drug for Americans. So if you take the year, most of the celebrations around the year happen, and they're based on sugar foundation. So let's start with Easter.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have? Easter eggs, and you've got all kinds of
jelly beans,
bunnies, and you're taught so many things about the story of Easter that have nothing to do with Easter. But the main I was going to say bribe method of grandparents or whatever is going to be some kind of sugar. Then we have, of course, birthdays throughout the year, but let's come to the next big festivity of get-together. It will be July, and it's built around all kinds of eating and kinds of celebration, and of course there's going to be some sugar, which would include maybe some alcohol. And then if I miss a celebration around sugar, maybe you'll find your own. But the one that really, really sticks out is Halloween. Trick or treat. The kids are demanding drugs, the drug of sugar, because that's what they're told is cool and cute, and it's to be done because we've always done it. But now I'm going to bring in some other factors that show you why there's so many funerals come January and February. Thanksgiving, the best pies with the best sugar, with the best topping, with the best whipped cream, the overeating, the traveling to see family, the indulgence of it leaves a person quite ill or ready to be ill. There's not much recovery time between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And Christmas is probably the biggest stress factor. Just the travel, the being with relatives that you wish you didn't have, putting up with sleeping someplace and trying to enjoy the travel and the sleeping. But then when you add in all of the Christmas candy and the Christmas festivities, almost every main dish is built around sugar. And if that isn't bad enough, we didn't recover from Thanksgiving. Now we don't recover from Christmas, and then we have New Year's, which is totally supposed to be some just back off of any restraint and just be stupid and party and New Year's celebration, all this and that. So your pH of your body has been so damaged from all that sugar, all that stress. One negative thought takes 30 minutes of laughter, according to somebody who did the acid study on humans. Takes 30 minutes of laughter to get the pH back to just one negative thought. And I seldom have been a party to some kind of a get-together where family gets together for Christmas or Thanksgiving, that somebody doesn't throw a spat or somebody doesn't get upset. And the negative thought, it affects everybody. It's hard to, you want to be the peacemaker. You want to, if you understand the stress load of just the emotion change in the body pH from alkaline to acid. So come January, man, if you get a flu shot on top of all that, is it any wonder we have so many deaths in January, February? There's no common sense. Of course, that's hard to understand itself. There's no common sense when it comes to trying to avoid having a cleansing action after that much torture for a whole year of taking in nasty sugar. Now, when it comes to the immune system, I'd be totally remiss if I didn't tell you where the big mess is in American diet. You know, some people listen to me and they say, well, what can I have? If I can't have sugar, well, I'm going to pick on another sacred cow, if you don't mind. Is this a good time for that?
Please, go ahead.
The human body was never designed, according to some studies, for more than 6% wheat in any given meal. What happens to break down, especially the white processed, whiter the bread, the quicker you're dead, that kind of stuff?
Right.
The more of that you have in a given day, the more gluten glues up your colon, and you get layers upon layers. And when they do a cadaver, sometimes they do a cross-section of a colon, and it'll have 12 inner tubes inside of 12 inner tubes. In other words, it looks like rings of a tree. And so the wheat fetish of America is enough to, I just cringe. Take, for instance, a pizza. What percent is actual, maybe something safe and not toxic on a pizza? Is it 20%? Maybe 30 if you really pile on? And then sometimes they'll put mozzarella cheese, which, talk about rectal cement. You chew the stuff until you finally get it small enough. You swallow a whole lump, and it goes down and it lumps up your colon. That, along with the gluten, white flour, the gluten with no fiber, it becomes an encased slime. And now the body cannot feed you through the colon because you've got this slimy inner tube stuck in there. Now, if you look at your other, I've been to out to eat with somebody at a buffet.
Yes.
And watch these overweight, obese kids go back for 3 and sometimes 4 helpings of nothing but macaroni and cheese. So if we take out the cheese, what have we got? 10% cheese and fillers, and the rest is white flour. And so when we look at the lifestyle of Thanksgiving, full of white flour and pastries, Christmas, more pastries, January, more pastries, and then, of course, if you manage to make it through January, what's the one just waiting to really nail you again with sugar? Valentine's. But if a person was to study the foolishness of our society going for the cheap meal, and I remember talking years ago to a family that was paying $1,600 for 2 kids and 2 adults a month for their sick care insurance. They told me it was health care insurance. I said, no, it's sick care. They wait for you to get sick and then care if you've made your payments. But he said, I can't afford to eat healthy. And I thought, oh, my goodness, of course you can't.
Yeah.
When a quarter of your income is going to somebody in case you're going to get sick. Well, if you're going to eat cheap food, you're going to get sick. You're going to need your insurance. So it's like puppy chase a tail. If you can't figure out how to get off that fast train to sinking health, you're going to have to listen to the show here and pick and choose and start looking for your own life, because the gluten sensitivity is rampant. In fact, I'm going to be bold enough to say that I think everybody is allergic to overeating of white flour, especially the white flour. I think everybody is gluten sensitive. Now, some, when they get to be intolerant, in other words, it shows enough symptoms, side effects, they will actually seek out somebody and start looking for gluten-free. And you're going to see a huge, it's already started, a huge increase in companies getting smart enough to put out gluten-free products.
Right.
Now, we're going to have to be careful because they're jumping on the bandwagon. We pay sometimes $6 a loaf for gluten-free bread. And my brother, I remember one time going to a store and I was buying some bread that was like $3.50, $3.90 a loaf. This is a few years back. And, he looked at the price. You buy that bread. I can't afford that bread. I said, I know you can't. You have to save your money for the drugs you're taking.
Yeah. I'll tell you one here. I have another naturopathic doctor that I have on my show pretty often, and his name is Dr. Patrick Hatwan, and the thing that I enjoy that he's gotten my family on not a gluten-free but a grain-free diet. We've eliminated all grains in our household, but this is the way that he says it, and I think it's pretty slick. You know, he said a turkey has a gizzard, a chicken, has a gizzard. They're intended to eat grains because that gizzard, that's what it does. It takes care of that grain, but we as humans don't have gizzards. So what makes us think that we can handle grains? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I personally believe if you study history, about the only purpose for grains was to get people through famine time, starvation time.
Right.
It was like the last resort to survive until you can get back to fresh vegetables and growing your own and picking your own fruit.
And you're pointing to like Egypt during the time of Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that grain would have been quite nutrient dense compared to what we have. It's been so promoted today. So, and if I might share a little bit about the danger of some of the grain, it's so full of pesticides. I don't know if I shared that on the show, where we used to sift the flour at home. Do you remember, Rick?
I don't recall you sharing that. No, go ahead.
Well, one of the favorite things on the farm to do, Mom had this one drawer with full of a sack of flour in it, and you'd reach in with this little sifter and you'd sift out the worm casings and anything that was not powdery. And that was one of my favorite memories, and we'd fight over who gets to sift Mama's flour. And so later, when I was fortunate enough to be a title of millwright, so I ended up working in a flour factory. And I always wondered, how come the white flour never had anything in it like what my mom's flour had? So one day I asked some questions of these canisters that we were supposed to pick up. They were emptied on the flour mixing machines, and they had skull and crossbones on them. And I said, what is that poison for? And they told me that that's what they have to put in the flour so that when the weevil hatches, there's enough preservative to make sure that it never grows to the size that you could see it with the naked eye. And I thought, that's why white flour can sit in the bag for years and it's still powdery and there's no weevils hatched. So then I had a question for them. They had a whole section that was really gaining speed. This was back in the 80s. And it was really picking up, and they're starting to put in more machines to squeeze out some of the other machines for whole wheat flour. And I thought, well, how can you have whole wheat flour? And sure enough, they showed me a machine called an entylator, and that entylator would spin the yolk so it never hatched. So they don't have to have preservative in the flour if they use an entylator.
Interesting. Well, we're down inside of 1 minute left in the broadcast, so I will let you, kind of wrap it up. Maybe give us a sneak peek of what's coming up next week or next time.
Next time.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah.
I want to cover some more thing. Something that I don't know too many touching is called frequencies. And everything on planet Earth has frequencies, and it can be put together, healed, or taken apart with frequencies. So that's a world that some people may not understand. I'll try to shed some light on it.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely do that. I'll give you a buzz after this after we go off the air, and see if we'll schedule another time for you to come back on.
I always like to close with ignore your health. It'll go away.
Yeah, and I love that. So again, I'm just going to thank you again for coming on the broadcast. Thank you for being part of the show. Your series is wonderful, and it's been very inspirational, and a lot of people are listening. So that's a really good thing. People are taking interest in their health. So I appreciate your availability, Dr. Klebs.
Okay, appreciate it too.
So for Dr. Klebs, this is Rick Hidalgo. This has been the House of Hidalgo show. We appreciate you for stopping by. Make sure you leave us a note. God bless and good night. Stay safe, guys.